and that we are enabled to meet remotely by governor's order, state of emergency order, and also Act 92 of the legislature as a public body. So with that, Jim, do you want to? Actually, I think what we should do is we should do a roll call of commissioners for the record. So I'll start. I'm Janet Hurley, representing the town of Manchester. Cinda.
Cinda Morse, representing Shaftesbury.
Nancy.
Nancy Fazy, representing Dorset.
John.
John LaVecchia Jr., representing Rupert.
Let's see, Anthony.
Anthony, representing Manchester Village.
Dixie.
Dixie Zenz, from Sunderland.
And let's see, who do we have? Dana?
Dana Rozicki from North Bennington.
Charlie.
Charlie Rockwell, Rupert.
And John LaVecchia Sr. from?
Yeah. From Dorset.
Okay, and Nick?
Nick Zayas from Arlington.
And I don't know who 413-822-8528 is.
That would be Wayne Goodman at Bennington.
Oh, okay. And we have Cooper. Who's Cooper?
Probably Jonathan. That's probably staff.
Oh, okay, Jonathan. Okay, and Sheila.
Sandgate.
Okay, I think that's all the commissioners. Did I miss any commissioners who are on the call?
Well, we have our interest group commissioners, I think, Stephanie and Megan.
Oh, Stephanie, I did see, yes. Stephanie, will you state your name? And you're muted.
Sorry, Stephanie Lane, and I'm representing housing.
And Megan.
Megan Harrington, I'm representing public health.
And the rest is staff, I believe.
I think you got it, yeah.
Okay, so that's who we have so far. I guess as anyone else logs on, Jim, you can catch them.
Yep, pay attention.
Yep. And then, so the first item on the agenda is to approve minutes of the July meeting. Do I have a motion from a commissioner to do that?
Probably a lot of people did.
Would anyone like to put forth a motion to approve the minutes from the July meeting? A commissioner?
I moved to put, yes, I moved.
I second.
Jim, did you get both of those?
I got them.
And all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, it's unanimous, which means we don't have to do a roll call vote. Which we would have had to have done otherwise because of this remote status. Okay, and then I'm gonna let Jim introduce the bylaws, the proposed bylaws revisions to open up, and then open up discussion on those.
Thank you, Janet. So there's the agenda, and you can see the next item on the agenda is the BCRC bylaw revisions. So I'll, with any luck, I'll bring those up here on the screen shortly. There they are. I don't know, can you all see those okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Now, like, minimize that. So let me just a little bit of background on the bylaws maybe would be helpful. So the BCRC has had these bylaws largely following this general format for about the last 52 years. But they have evolved a bit over time. And one of the major points of evolution has been the representation from municipalities and interest groups. And so we've continued to try to refine that over time. And we found that one of the real challenges that we have as an organization is that honestly, most of our votes these days, and we have a lot of votes, but most of them involve approval of municipal plans and amendments to municipal plans and occasionally regional plans. And those are really time-sensitive votes. And because of the large number of commissioners we have, relatively large number, we used to have a lot more in the bylaws, it used to be around 50. It can be pretty challenging to gather the requisite number of votes to get these plans approved, and municipalities especially really rely on having approved plans to be eligible for grants and certain other so let me go over the some of the changes that are highlighted here. And I think probably the best way for to handle this is for me to go through these, and then I'll take it down off the screen for a minute, and I can see everybody better, and people can just kind of either raise their hand digitally or on the camera, and we can have a facilitated discussion. So the commissioners are appointed by the town or the village, and there used to be 3 from each town and 2 from each village in Glastonbury. That was pretty unwieldy. So a number of years ago, it was changed to 2 from each town and 1 from each village in Glastonbury. And the proposal now is to change that again to have 1 voting commissioner from each town and village, as well as the unorganized town of Glastonbury, as well as 1 we essentially call a co-commissioner. So that person would not have a vote unless the commissioner were not present to vote or available to vote. And the other change would be that in order to ensure that we have full representation from all of the municipalities, if the select board or trustees don't appoint a commissioner, then the default commissioner for us to send information to, for example, would become the chair of that municipality's planning commission. Just to make sure, that we covered our bases, there's a provision saying that, commissioners representing the municipalities as well as the interest groups, which I'll talk about a little bit, are entitled to vote on all matters coming before the commission consistent with statutory limitations. There's a few, I should say the economic development commissioners are. A few of the commissioners are interest group representatives. A few are specifically appointed to the commission by the Economic Development Committee, which is really the Bennington County Industrial Corporation or the Regional Development Corporation. Since we kind of work in very close partnership with them, that was a change that was made a couple of years ago. So the other interest group representatives, which at the moment I think are housing, energy, transportation, and public health, we continue to be members of the commission, but would be non-voting members. That was always a little bit unclear, but they say that the the statute specifically says that votes on plans have to be passed by a majority of the municipal representatives. The bylaws had previously said that, but it also had said that any action by the commission has to be approved by a majority of the full commission. So that led to some confusion over how many votes. So we're basically aligning the bylaws with the statute on that. And again, the voting is, as I just explained it, that the commissioner has the vote, the co-commissioner is essentially an alternate when the commissioner can't vote. Both continue to be, representatives from the municipality, and, both certainly will get all the communications from and the commission. And both the commissioner and co-commissioner are eligible to serve committees. Another change in this paragraph under voting is essentially codifying something that we've been doing out of necessity, and that is that any vote may be taken by postal and or electronic email ballot prior to the meeting. And let's say that's the note that commissioners and co-commissioners are eligible to hold offices as well as serve on committees. And I believe that's the full extent of the changes. And I'm going to, I think I'm going to, because I can't really see who's here, I'm going to take that down. But if anybody needs to see that again, let me know. So Janet, that's a quick overview, and I would summarize it by basically saying the number of municipal commissioners from towns is basically changing from 2 to 1, but everybody has a co-commissioner too. That's far and away the biggest proposed change.
I mean, I would just clarify that the purpose of this is to make it easier to gain a quorum, but also to ensure that we have full representation from each town. Because it's been difficult for Jim to keep there's been a lot of vacancies. And, maybe if a town only has to have 1 voting member, it would be easier to keep those positions from being vacant. And then this issue or the provision to appoint the planning commission chair as the de facto voting member if the town or village fails to appoint somebody will also help. So I think those are the reasons behind this change. And I think it's also in recognition of the fact that, over time, the commission has become more of an informational community and exchange. I'm not thinking of the word I want, but it's less of a decision-making body and more of a discussion-generating body, I think, and this recognizes that.
Thanks, Jan.
Do you want a motion to start a conversation?
Yeah, let me just throw out one set of numbers, and then we'll open it up. So there currently are 39 commissioner positions on the BCRC between the, I believe that'd be 30 municipal representatives, 5 economic development, and 4 interest groups. And the change would result in there being 26. So it'd go from 39 to 26, or a reduction of a third, with 17 municipal reps, 5 economic development, and 4 interest groups. Although, that said, remember all the 13 municipality, the 13 towns would still have a co-commissioner representative. So there would in fact still be 39 people serving on the commission, but 26 votes. And currently there are 39 with 39 votes.
But for some issues, there are not 26 votes. There are just the number of member municipality votes, right?
Yes, and there's a whole list of things by statute that only the municipal representatives can vote on. Those really involve most of the things that we vote on, which are, town plan approvals and regional plan approvals and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
So the number of voting members for those is just the number of member municipalities, which is it 17?
Yes, there's 17 municipalities.
Okay.
Dixie would like to ask a question.
I just, one, I'd like to know what establishes, what numbers the quorum, and 2, this says that the voting is affirmed by the majority of commissioners voting. So if you have a quorum, does that mean 51 or 50% have to vote for that if we're missing other commissioners?
Yeah, so it's kind of a, I think when this was first set up, the expectation was that most of the votes would be votes at the meeting and in person. So this kind of sets up a bifurcated process, but yes, a quorum specifically is identified as either a majority of the number of municipalities represented at a meeting, or a majority of commissioners at the meeting. At the same time, we added this new clause, or proposing to add the new clause that allows voting by mail. And so in that case, it would be by statute for the most part, a majority vote of the commissioners who are eligible to vote on the question would be required to pass the vote. But for in-person meetings like this one and a vote like this one on the bylaws, it's a majority of the commissioners present and voting.
As long as we have a quorum of the member municipalities represented.
As long as we have a quorum as defined by the bylaw, yes.
And we do tonight.
We do. Cinda, I think you were next up.
Yeah, so I will make a motion to approve the bylaw changes as presented.
I'll second that motion.
Who was that?
Dixie?
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Dixie's off screen here. I
Yeah.
did it quick.
All right, there I am.
There you go.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
Janet?
Yes.
Hi, this is John from Rupert. And
Yeah.
Charlie and I were talking earlier and just kind of wondering out loud, in the unlikely event, what would happen, say, for instance, if a commissioner chose to abstain from a vote rather than vote negative or affirmative or not be present?
You mean what would happen in terms of quorum?
Yeah, or what an abstention, is an abstention a vote, or does an abstention lead to a co-commissioner vote?
No, an abstention is a vote.
Right,
Yeah.
that's what we thought.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, maybe we could clarify that. An abstention is a vote, and the net effect of it for almost everything that we vote on, since the statutory requirements are for, a majority of the commissioners, then it would amount to a no vote, because a majority has to vote in the affirmative.
Yep, okay.
And if this is approved tonight, I would suggest that it's something that we would have to kind of phase in through the rest of this calendar year, because it would have to go back to the municipalities and ask them to designate commissioners and co-commissioners.
Jim? Rupert can do it next week.
Thank you, Rupert. Maybe we can phase it in more quickly.
I don't see it as a big deal. I mean, I'm gonna just explain to the select board, recommend commissioner, co-commissioner, all in favor, aye, done.
Is it the select board or the planning commission who decides?
The select board.
Select board.
The
Okay.
select board.
Any more discussion on the motion to accept the bylaws changes as proposed? Are you raising your hand, Anthony? Or
No,
just,
no.
okay.
No.
So I'll ask for all those in favor to say aye.
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 Any opposed? Anthony, are you, did you vote no?
I voted yes.
Oh, okay. So was there a no? I thought I heard somebody respond when I asked for a no vote. I'll ask one more time. Were there any no votes? Okay, any abstentions? Okay, so it's unanimous. We do not have to do a roll call vote. Woohoo!
Big time saver. Okay. We'll get to work on implementing that. Thank you, everyone. The next thing on the agenda I'm really much looking forward to is our staff updates, and the folks here, I think, I'll have a very short presentation and just an overview of some of the things they're working on. And so I'll run through person by person, if that's okay, Janet. Just have a very brief presentation, and I just want to give commissioners a chance to ask questions about what we're working on or what we might work on. The first thing I would like to do, and the first person I'd like to recognize, though, is Callie Fishburne. Callie, say hi.
Hello.
Callie is the new Vista working with the BCRC, and she's jumped into the fire here in the middle of the COVID epidemic, working on a lot of the business and economic support services with Bill and Jonathan, also on some of the rural broadband issues and some of the local food issues. So welcome, Kelly. Thank you for coming and helping.
Glad to be here.
Okay. Let me go to, I'll just go around the order I see folks on my screen. Kat, you're lucky you happen to be the first one on my screen. So Catherine Byers.
Lucky me. All right. I'm gonna share a screen with you guys because I find it a little bit more interesting to see some pictures while I talk. There we go. Is that? I think you guys can see you. Can you see this PowerPoint up?
Yep.
Yep, great. All right. Well, I think everybody knows me, but I'm Pat Byers, and my title is Community Planning Program Manager. So what that means is I do a little bit of everything, but a little bit more specifically, I share with Jim Sullivan the responsibility of overseeing kind of some of the core municipal planning and regional planning responsibilities that we have at the Commission. So here's two great examples to start off with of projects that are underway and hopefully close to being finished up. Updating Rupert's town with a Act 174 compliant compliant energy chapter and updating the Glastonbury bylaw development regulations to ensure consistency with some change in statute and address some land use issues that have been going on there. And I'm going to move, we work at different scales at the BCRC. So I'm starting at our municipal scale work that I'm doing and moving up because we also do regional scale and even some state level work. But here's another project that's at the municipal scale, integrating some form-based standards into the Bennington bylaw. So you can see there's just some nice pictures for you guys to look at. We've proposed some new form-based design areas where some form-based standards are going to apply in the town center. And we have these beautiful graphics that have been developed that correspond with the new standards to help illustrate and hopefully make the standards a little bit easier for people to navigate. Moving up the scale, we have a two-town study that's going on for Bennington and Pownell, and actually down into Williamstown, Massachusetts as well. This is the trolley path scoping study that is well underway. And we're looking at the viability of converting an old trolley car bed that used to run from Bennington down to Williamstown, converting that into a shared use path as a safe alternative to trying to walk bike on Route 7 between these areas, which is not safe. And there's some really cool history to the trolley line that we get to explore as part of that. And Mark Anders is working on this, and he can't be here tonight, by the way. He's doing something else we work on for a bike committee in the town of Bennington. He's doing a ride around to help build a biking culture in the community, make some improvements to bikeability. Now up to the regional level. Here's the regional project that I'm working on. It's actually back in 2018, working with the RPP, which is the Regional Prevention Partnership, headed up by the Collaborative in the North Shire. We published this health planning primer, which has information for towns in our region to adopt policies in their town plans or specific development regulations that can help encourage healthy communities. And we're currently working to update it with information on retail marijuana, recreational marijuana, which does look like it's finally moving forward. Another regional project is this housing bylaw survey, and Jim Sullivan will quickly tell you that he's done much more work on this to date than I have. But I'm gearing up and ready to go. We're going to go town by town in the county and do an assessment of existing bylaws and identify areas where they can be strengthened to better allow diverse and more affordable and dense housing by town. So here's an example from Arlington. And just an example of something I'm working on at the state level. I'm currently on the executive committee of the VPA, the Vermont Planning Association, which is a professional planning organization in this. And one thing we've been really busy on in the last year is providing testimony and position papers on legislation. So a big one has been the Act 250 reform bill that's been kind of slimmed down over time to its current status, and also S237, which is a housing bill that frankly VPA has had some reservations about, but we've been really happy working with the legislature to update sections of that. So that's a quick overview of some of the things I'm working on.
Thanks, Kat. Does anybody have questions for Kat? Projects you want her to work on?
Work. Doing a great job.
That's a lot of work.
Thanks, Kat. So I don't see any virtual or real life hands. So I'll move over to Bill.
Great. Thanks, Jim. I'm also going to try to share a couple of photos here, if you bear with me. I don't know, are those coming up?
Not yet by me.
Kat, does he have sharing capability? Can you check?
Should have, yep. We could come back to you. Oh,
Hang on 1 second.
Oh,
working.
there we go.
All right, thank you. Sorry about that. Wanted to update the group. I know folks. Let me take a step back. I'm Bill Colvin. I'm the Assistant Director of BCRC and the Director of the Bennington County Industrial Corporation. Head up BCRC's Community and Economic Development Program. Both BCRC and BCIC have been integrally involved, I think as people are aware, with the Putnam Block redevelopment project. So I thought I'd take just a moment to give a brief update on where that project stands. I'm sure people have received some questions about it and want to get the kind of the latest information. So like all projects in Vermont, we were shut down as part of the overall shutdown of the economy and all construction activity in Vermont back in the early stages of the pandemic. So during that time, we lost about 6 actual weeks during the shutdown and 2 or 3 additional weeks as we went from 120 plus people on site down to 0 and then had to ramp back up with all of the concomitant challenges of getting the contractors and subs restaffed and people who were on unemployment coming back, et cetera. So overall, we lost about 8 or 9 weeks. The unfortunate corollary of that is it costs about $50,000 a week for the project to be dormant. So added cost of about $500,000 to what was already a pretty tight project budget. But nonetheless, back up running at this point. If you drive by Franklin Lane at any point now, you'll see a parking lot, this parking lot up at the top, full with contractor pickups and other vehicles and a lot of activity back on the site. So you'll see in the top photo here, the parking lot is paved with its final coat as they continue to work on the site. That dirt area towards the back, which is up against the back side of actually the building that we're currently in, the Drysdale building, will be a grassed area, and ultimately down the road with some additional funding, hopefully will become a more hardscaped plaza, which we hope will host things such as the Bennington Farmers Market. These photos show some of the work in the interior of the Putnam building. These are actually a few weeks old at this point. All 17 residential units on the upper floor of the Putnam are now completely framed out and mostly sheetrock. Doors are being hung, and the work there is really progressing very quickly on the Putnam. And this building shows some interior work and the Winslow building, which is the 3rd building on the site, and then one of the micro apartments, which will serve as housing for ultimately some Bennington College graduate students. Unfortunately, due to the shutdown, we missed the start of the Bennington College school year, so we're going to be off cycle with regard to graduate students occupying downtown housing for the time being. So those will actually be market units for the time being until probably the start of the next school year. The good news is there's tremendous demand for all of these units, both the efficiency units, 1-bedroom units, and the two-bedroom units. The 2-bedroom units in particular are in tremendous demand. It feels like at this point we could rent as many of those as we could build. So there's a waiting list for 2 bedrooms, which is 3 times the number of the available units, which is obviously very positive. Overall, we are on track to have Breadloaf Construction, who's the construction manager, complete their initial contract for the courthouse building, which is their contract is for all of the shell work and some limited interior fit up work on the courthouse. We expect that to be done in late October. For the Putnam building, Breadloaf's contract includes vanilla box commercial spaces on the first floor and the full build out for the 17 residential units on the upper floors, functionally making those units ready to move people in. And we expect to begin moving residents into the hotel in December. So mid to late November will be the completion of that contract. And for Winslow, that will be similarly timed for a mid-November completion of the Breadloaf contract. That will include the fit up of the 13 residential units in Winslow and the full build out of Bennington College's development office space. So certainly, hopefully by December, certainly by January, we will have most, if not all of the 30 units fully occupied in phase one. And we'll have, we expect Bennington College's development office in there as well. Soon to follow after that, we expect the Bennington Bookshop will move early in 2021 to a space in the courthouse floor. And then Global Z in the upper floors of the courthouse, probably more towards the summer of next year. We have just signed a lease with a restaurant for the former South Street Cafe space, which is extended. It's about double in size from the old South Street Cafe space, and we'll have some exterior seating. And we're near to an agreement on a coffee shop, which would be adjacent to the bookshop. And then we have some other commercial uses also slated in on those first floor spaces, including the Visiting Nurses Association will be in the rear of the Winslow building. Southwest Vermont Healthcare will have some public facing occupancies in the upper floor of the Winslow building. And we're expecting to announce an additional 2 leases for commercial uses also in Putnam, which would leave us with just 2 small retail spaces left to rent in that building. So I'll take off screen share and talk about some of the other things that we've been working on in the Community and Economic Development Program. I know Jonathan is on the line, and I'm going to leave him to speak about all of his work in broadband and some grant assistance work. I'll talk about more an overview of our work, which, as people might expect, was completely changed as a result of the shutdown and the pandemic back in March. We have quickly converted to business support and response mode throughout the pandemic. So beginning in mid-March with the first executive order up to this week, we have been in contact with we've had over 400 business contacts in various means of support for businesses throughout the region. Primarily those fell into 3 categories early in the shutdown. It was around understanding executive orders and compliance with executive orders and what essential business meant. There was a lot of confusion at the outset about, am I allowed to continue operation? How do I have to change that operation, et cetera? So that happened primarily in March into early April, followed quickly by significant changes in unemployment insurance, opening those programs up to people who previously had never been covered, gig economy workers, independent contractors, self-employed people. So understanding, helping businesses understand either for themselves or their employees what those changes were was a significant part of our work in late March into mid-April, and then throughout has been working with businesses to access various funding opportunities, state, local, and federal. So the PPP and EIDL programs that were available nationally, and more recently, the Vermont Economic Recovery Grants, which were available through the Agency of Commerce and the Tax Department. We're very fortunate that Bennington Region did very well in both of those, in all of those programs actually. Fair amount of PPP money went to our region, and we have also seen a fair amount come to the region for the Vermont Economic Recovery Grants. And we are about to, the governor will announce at his press conference tomorrow. It was originally set to go live on Tuesday, but Dr. Anthony Fauci joined the governor and preempted his announcement, which will now come tomorrow, for a new technical assistance program available through the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. That Navigator network, so-called, will be coordinated through each of the 12 regions, and we will be the coordinator in the Bennington region. And the effort there is connecting businesses who have suffered some type of loss as a result of COVID with some type of technical assistance, be that legal, financial, architectural, website or IT design, getting small projects done, $3,000 to $4,000 projects paid for with this grant, and connecting technical assistance providers in the region with businesses who need that assistance. So it actually is, doubly beneficial. It'll get some business to various technical assistance providers, accountants, attorneys, architects, web developers, and the like. And hopefully it will provide some assistance to businesses who are in need of those services. So that will go live tomorrow. Look for some emails from Jim on that as we get the okay tomorrow around 12:30 to make that announcement and start going live with that program. And finally, at the state level, similar to Kat, I have just begun my tenure as the Vice President of the Regional Development Corporations of Vermont, which is an organization bringing together the 12 RDCs. That organization is focused on legislative advocacy, coordination with our various partners around the state, and professional development for the regional development corporations. And we meet monthly as a group and weekly to discuss during the legislative session to discuss various legislative efforts. That group has really begun to coalesce in some important ways, including this technical assistance grant. So the 12 RDCs came together as a group to apply for, to be the navigators, and were awarded that grant, which is going to present some important funding to our organization for the last 3 months of this year, help get us over for what was a really uncertain funding year. And similarly have applications into the EDA for similar work ongoing. So that's the update that I have from my portion of community economic development. Thank you.
Bill, any questions for Bill? I don't see any at the moment, so if you think of one, chime in later. But going in order on my screen, Allison, you're lucky, so you're up next.
I wasn't expecting that. I thought you were going to call on Jonathan.
No, mixing it up a little bit. So,
so I'm not going to give a whole talk about what I'm working on. I just have a couple things I was going to mention. So I'm the Emergency Management Program Manager. I mostly work with municipalities to help them get their emergency operations plans or management plans now in order, and to update those and some other things. Currently, we are working on a Wi-Fi study to check the public Wi-Fi hotspots. Callie, is Callie still on? She's helping me out a lot with that. So you might see her out in the region, stopping at the public spots and checking your Wi-Fi signals. So that's been really helpful. So what I really wanted to talk about in my little block of time was our website. I have put a lot of time into working on COVID resources. So much information started coming out in the beginning of this, and it's taken a few different forms over the period, but I feel like we have a pretty good system now to put stuff up, and it's just has an abundance of COVID resources. So I was going to walk you through how to find it and some of the things we have on there. So I'm going to share screen too. This is the first time I've had to do this, so bear with me. Let's see, where is it? Oh, there we go. Share screen. Is it doing it?
Yep.
Okay, you can see it. All right, let me do. So I have our, can you see everything? It's so weird because now I'm only seeing my slideshow. So it feels like.
Yes, we can see it, Allison.
Okay, great. So here's our website. If anyone wants to take a look, I'm sure most of you know it. Here are a couple screenshots. My whole PowerPoint is just screenshots because I talked with Kat. I wasn't sure if there would be a lagging if I was doing it in real time. So anyways, you'll see I've highlighted for you COVID resources button on our main page. You can also find it by going up with your cursor and putting it over the resources tab, and it will be a drop down menu, and it's the very first one will take you there also. So there's a couple ways you can get there. I also wanted to just chime out about our news and notes section. We update that frequently with topics from all different programs. So if you're ever wondering what's really like happening at the moment, take a look at the news and notes, and it might direct you to the news and notes page, or it might just take you right to whatever document it's talking about. And then, so when you go into COVID resources, I had to break the screen up in a few, so sorry about, it's like my screenshot couldn't take the whole thing at once. So, and you wouldn't be able to see it. So anyways, this is our COVID resources page, and I have a few different sections. I have my email there, so if you're ever like, oh, this could really benefit the community and seeing this, send it to me, and I'll put it up. So the first 6 buttons, as you can see, will take you to internal pages within our website, and we'll go through those, but I just wanted to mention, so those are internal links. And then underneath there, you'll have the data and modeling, and these are some of my favorite things. These come out frequently. The current activity is an ongoing site with the Department of Health that will take you to their current activity page. It's pretty interesting. And then below that is the modeling page, and that comes out almost weekly. Sometimes it's missing, but it's a pretty interesting thing that's put together. And then my favorite is the summary of Vermont, and that is also weekly, but there have been a few weeks where it's missing. But the summary is really interesting. It takes you to a PDF, and it has like a lot of charts and graphs and really interesting graphics, and it'll tell you all about how things are progressing or getting better, mostly getting better in our state. And I don't know, it's pretty interesting. So I wanted to have a button on our main resources page for that. And then underneath that are links to state agencies with other COVID-19 resources. It might duplicate some of the things that we have on our page, but those three state agencies have an abundance of information. And so from there, I wanted to just briefly walk through each one. So food resources and distributions. This one was changing a lot in the very beginning with all the different meal distributions going on statewide and in our communities. It has slowed down quite a bit, but I believe all of these are still accurate. It talks a lot about different kinds of food pantries, and the Veggie Van Go is always up to date, and then different resources from state food programs is listed in here too, and those don't change very frequently. Next is our community and individual resources. This is kind of, I'm always shifting stuff around here to try and make it flow better. This really has kind of all different information from like public health and mental health to home health services to Planned Parenthood telehealth resources, legal assistance, housing assistance, internet connectivity, and then other resources that don't quite fit in but are important to the community. Economic business and business support resources is our biggest page. This just has so much information, mostly funding resources. This is still being updated pretty frequently, like multiple times a week. So there's all sorts of funding, there's all sorts of guidance for reopening, unemployment resources, and then other information on there. There's a lot in there. Municipal resources. This one doesn't change as frequently. There has been, I'm sure you've all heard of the LGER grant, LIGER, I think is what we're calling it. That's been updated, and that's a current grant that's happening, and I think they just extended it. So the application deadline is October 1st. So that's up there right in the beginning. The state also had face coverings a program recently where municipalities register online and get free face coverings for their communities. So that's up there. I have planning templates, guidance from ACCD, FEMA funding. I put that under a separate category because there's always a lot of stuff there. And then training resources. So through all of this, I also put together a lot of emergency management trainings, and since those are all pretty much on hold, I put up training resources so any municipal member could go on and sign up for online trainings. And the state learning management system has a lot of stuff that's up currently, and then also the Emergency Management Institute always has online trainings in there. You can find like ICS, things like that. And then school and childcare resources. This is also a really busy topic at the moment for all the schools that are reopening. So there's a ton of guidance on here. I just put up a ton of facts today, or frequently asked questions. And there's all sorts of guidance for that. There's childcare guidance, and then a few grants that came through that I picked up. Oh, I also wanted to mention, I get a lot of this information from the situation reports. Those come out daily, and then at the end of the week, they usually have a bigger situation report with a lot of information and detail in it. And so most of my information on the website comes from those situation reports, but we also get a lot of information from ACCD. I get a lot of information from Bill and Jonathan and other state agencies. And then we also sometimes get them directly from community members. So, and then our last page here is the volunteering and ways to help. And I wanted to give a shout out to Bennington College. They helped compile all this information for me back, it was like just a couple months into COVID. And they put together all of these nonprofit organizations, what they do, if anyone wanted to donate to them. So it's kind of a donations page, ways to help. And also at the bottom, which I thought was really interesting, is that they gave me a list of these 4 farms at the bottom that donate to food banks. So I thought that was really, really neat. So if someone ever wanted to, reach out to them and do a donation to help them keep providing food for food banks, that was on there too. So that's the end of my COVID resources website. If you have any suggestions for me, I am not a web designer, so I am always open to suggestions on how to make it look better.
Thank you, Allison. You may not be a web designer, but I just have to share this little story from today that I actually got a call from the National Association of Development Organizations today asking if I would present at a web conference on how regional organizations can help municipalities and other community organizations and individuals continue operations and respond to the pandemic. And I was like, why in the world are you asking me? No. And they said, well, your COVID response website is so good. We've been using it as a template for RPCs all around the country. So congrats, Allison.
Thank you. That makes me feel so good.
All right. Any questions for Allison? I don't see any. So next on my screen is Michael. Michael Batcher, Solid Waste Emergency Management Planning and various other town planning support services.
Well, hi all, I'm Michael Batcher. I'm regional planning with the commission. And what I want to talk about is the work of the Bennington County Solid Waste Alliance. The alliance is made up of 13 towns within the county. And these include Arlington, Bennington, Dorset, Glastonbury, Manchester, Pownell, Rupert, Sandgate, Searsburg, Shaftesbury, Stamford, Sunderland, and Woodford. And in 2015, they were formed as an intergovernmental contract and developed a solid waste implementation plan. These SWIPs, or solid waste implementation plans, are required by the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources and follow a state plan called the Materials Management Plan. In Vermont, under statute, municipalities are responsible for the management of solid waste. So to facilitate that, that's the work of the Alliance. Now, there are a couple of towns in our county, Peru and Landgrove, that are part of another group. They're called the Londonderry Group, so they're not part of our alliance. One of the primary things that the alliance does is provide outreach to businesses, schools, institutions, and the public on managing organic materials, hazardous materials, electronic waste, pharmaceuticals, paint, and all kinds of other forms of solid waste. Because we're trying to keep these kind of materials out of a landfill or prevent them from being managed by incineration. In 2018, we hired Paula Camperman, who's the Alliance Outreach Program Manager, and she's the one who actually does all this work. She's been providing outreach to businesses and schools, including Shires Housing. She's met with Shires Housing a couple of times. And on managing food scraps, dealing with hazardous materials, mercury-containing devices, batteries are a big issue. Last year in 2019, she met with over 40 businesses and provided outreach to 10 events and met with 3 schools. This year we've been a little slower because of COVID-19. We haven't been able to provide as much in-person outreach, but we did put a lot of effort into responding to the July 1st food scrap ban. As you probably all know, food scraps are not to be sent to landfills, and so you need to divert your food scraps by composting at home or bringing them to your transfer station. We have this year updated the solid waste implementation plan, which would run for the period 2021 to 2025. These plans are effective for 5 years. We have submitted it for comments to ANR, and we're waiting to hear back from them. Once they're okay with it, then the Alliance will hold public meetings, which they've actually already held, but we'll hold more public meetings before they can adopt it, which has to be done by the end of this year. This past year, the Alliance has started working on a facility to recover asphalt shingles. Asphalt shingles are a substance that can be used. We've actually done some experimentation in Shaftesbury and Pownell on using them for road materials. The Alliance has decided not to create a facility for dealing with household hazardous waste. We instead have 2 events. We're going to go to 3 events next year. And the past events, which we had in August and September, we had over 500 households participate, which is much larger than we've had in past years. So people are still bringing lots of hazardous stuff. In fact, one of the fun things we got this past Saturday was 680 pounds of ammonium nitrate fertilizer, which I was happy to see. Luckily, there was no fuel oil mixed in with it.
Yeah.
So we get some interesting stuff. In addition to assist residents with the food ban on food scraps, we sold a boatload. I could give you exact numbers, but I'll just use a boatload of backyard composters, green cones, and all kinds of things that people can use to either compost at home or bring their materials to the transfer stations. We're a member of the Vermont Solid Waste District Managers Association, and that's a major factor in lobbying for solid waste laws and regulations. We're involved with the Vermont Product Stewardship Council, which is trying to basically find many more ways to make manufacturers responsible for the costs of disposing of these materials. So for instance, electronics are a good example where manufacturers, when you bring a computer to the transfer station, you don't pay for it, the manufacturers pay for it. And that's true with paint. We're trying to do the same thing for household hazardous waste and actually for packaging, which is a major mass of stuff, which in many cases isn't recyclable, like plastic bags and packaging you get from your Amazon box and the like. So that's an ongoing project. And I think those are the primary highlights. Solid waste is a very active program.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, it's been impressive to see the, especially for me to see the sales of those composters coming in. We definitely did a great job getting the word out. So, any questions for Michael?
We do have an active website and Facebook, and so we're pretty active in that sense as well.
Thank you. All right, I don't see anything, so I will go to Jonathan, who I think can bring us home with staff updates.
Is everybody looking at a map?
Yes.
Okay. So in the course of the conversation from some of my colleagues, I remembered something from a pre-lockdown COVID era, and I wanted to talk about it here. I don't know if I already have at any point. So again, my name is Jonathan Cooper, Community and Economic Development Specialist at BCRC. What we're looking at here is a map from the 2010 census of the tracts in Bennington County, starting with our biggin that ran from Sunderland, including county now, including Reedsboro and Searsburg, and reaching all the way up to a twofer in Sandgate and Rupert. And I wanted to say this is part of some of our recent work was managing how the 2020 census geography would look. This was done in some collaboration with Jeff Nugent of the Wyndham Regional Commission, because some of the towns in Bennington County are part of the Wyndham Regional Commission's service area. But this was sort of looking at what are the projected population changes and what are the natural connections between municipalities to keep things aligned with the census's need for sort of roughly uniform sizes in census tracts, so that like can be compared to like over time. And so I thought I'd just show you, there was a little bit of change. The southern half of the county remained largely intact, but it was in the northern portion of the county that we had the most action. So here is what the new districts look like. As you can see, Sunderland has sheared away from that large tract that reached down to the Massachusetts border and is now happily reunited with Sandgate and Arlington. Manchester, due to some growth in the northeastern corner of the town, will now have two census tracts. Dorset and Rupert are together, as the Mercs would want it. And but in any event, we see some pretty uniform activity along the other units. But I wanted to just sort of make mention of that as sort of one component from our sort of pre-pandemic activities. It had sort of slipped my mind, and in the course of the meeting tonight, I thought, oh, I can talk about this if I haven't already. That much of the southern portion of the county remains as it was, but some demographic shifts in the northern portion of the county meant some new boundaries with respect to the census, which I know all of you have filled out, and we're going to talk a bit more about the census and its implications for the rest of my presentation. I'll sort of pause there for a minute and jump to something I think we've all observed in the news reports of the past few months has been that real estate across the state, but certainly in our portion of the state, has been moving at a clip unseen for some time. And early surveys of our newest Vermonters, it sort of broke down that about 1/3 planned on having a permanent move, 1/3 planned on having a temporary move, and 1/3 weren't so sure. Felt like they could go either way. So pivoting from the census and with a quick acknowledgement that prior to this most recent activity, Bennington County, Vermont was slated to have about the same population, 2010 to 2020, so no growth in Vermont. Bennington County is tracking to lose about 5% of its population, and that 5% is spread out throughout the county. Almost everybody is expected to see a drop, and it's pretty spread out, and 5% is, 1 in every 20, so that's a significant loss. We're not the only ones tracking in that direction. Our colleagues in Wyndham County are also projected to lose 5%, and just like us, it is not just concentrated in the larger towns, but rather distributed throughout into our more rural reaches. So the thought is, what can we do to try to hold on to the people that maybe are here on a test drive? So the first thing I'll talk about is the Vermont Welcome Wagon Project. This is an initiative with some sort of regional chapters throughout the state. You'll see, for example, it began in Chittenden County, a Northeast Kingdom chapter emerged, and now we have a Southern Vermont chapter. So again, we are partnering with our colleagues in Wyndham County. And what you can see here is how it's about connecting new and returning Vermonters to community hosts and resources. And the idea here was simply that there would be some institutional knowledge that people who have been here for a while may have, and where there are sort of some alignments and interests with newcomers, there's an opportunity to let them put down roots in this area that's their new hometown. The pandemic has done a lot to unmoor people from their residences, from their communities, and in fact, obviously, if people are beginning to move around the country as a result. And so the Welcome Wagon Project is really meant to be a way for people who are currently here to help newcomers sort of fall right into the rhythms of life in a part of the world that some of us have been a part of for our whole lives. Some of us are more newcomers to, but it's a way for us to help people build connections at a time when it's very easy to feel a little isolated. In the conclusion of my remarks, I'll put some of these links that we're looking at in the chat so people can check things out for themselves if they'd like to know more. And certainly feel free to contact me and in my office, and I'm happy to field any requests. But this is a volunteer program that some people have decided to sign up for. We have our chamber on board, our regional young professionals chapter on board. So there's some good volunteers who are sharing some information that they have, and we've already seen people getting in touch with us. People, it's the quintessential, lived in Brooklyn, moved to Manchester, got 2 sons who are 8 and 10, and would love to know what some fun things we can do with them are. So that's one way for us to try to keep people who are just coming here for good. And something I want to sort of switch gears for a moment to the Southern Vermont Communications Union District that Bill mentioned earlier. Like BCRC, the Southern Vermont CUD is a political subdivision of the state of Vermont. I think some of you here are already well familiar with it. It has roughly the same service area as BCRC. In fact, it's the 14 towns of the BCRC service area with the exception of Stamford and Glastonbury. But it was created at town meeting day in March. And you can see there the geography pretty much mirrors what we're working with the BCRC. The CUD has entered into a shifting landscape, a remarkable realm where CUDs were sort of enabled by the state legislature to fill a gap that the telecommunications industry just wasn't interested in assisting with, and that is rural broadband and fiber connectivity. So the pandemic, however, threw into serious relief just how substantial that gap was across the United States. And so many of you maybe are aware that the Federal Communications Commission, the FCC, has authorized the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, which is billions and billions of dollars to be paid out over 10 years to subsidize the construction of and deployment of connectivity resources throughout rural stretches of the US where connectivity is lacking, unserved or underserved areas. I think most of us have seen, the broadband, the Department of Public Service pushing out some broadband related activities and grants, and the Southern Vermont CUD received one of those to conduct a feasibility study and to put together a business plan, and we're wrapping that up now. But the CUD has also received about a total of about $170,000 in state grants and philanthropic resources in the last 4 months. Obviously, this is very much tied to the CARES Act, so additional legislation is looking to provide another $300,000 perhaps, and that's all with a pretty quick timeline of the end of 2020 for spending. So the goal is to try to get these guys up and running, but of course, we're still in some formative stages about just what the appropriate approach would be, appropriate technologies, et cetera. It's worth mentioning here, the CUD, you can head into their website, is obviously as a political subdivision of the state, is bound by open meeting laws, and we ask that anybody who is interested should please check it out, join the meetings. Each town is represented by one commissioner or one member of the governing board and one alternate. I think some I saw in this meeting already. The initial activity of the CUD will be a poll survey of the poll placements and conditions in Peru, Dorset, Rupert, and Sandgate, areas of the greatest demonstrated need. And so we're hoping to get that underway in short order. But the idea here is that where the private sector has hesitated to go, the CUD is there to ensure that there are connectivity options sooner rather than later. I'll return to the notion of population activity by just dwelling for a moment on this research from the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston that was just released this week, which is a rather sobering look at the 40 counties of northern New England, 14 in Vermont, 10 in New Hampshire, and 16 in Maine. Every single one has seen its school age population decline in the last 20 years or so. And that's projected to continue in all but 5 of these counties. Bennington County is slated to lose over 8% of its current school age population by 2030. And the reason I'm dwelling on this is to get to another population and demographic related initiative there I'd like to sort of close out with. Because almost all of us live in towns that have schools in public schools that may have been built to house more students than they currently have. And on some days it can feel like back when the schools were all full in terms of having your ordinary academic years, sometimes it can feel a little bit like an amusement park on a slightly rainy day. When it's not bustling, it's not quite the same. So one element that we've been pursuing, and this is still in the planning phase, one resource is the Working Communities Challenge, also of the Boston Fed, initiative of the Boston Fed that began in southern New England, the southern New England states, and is now sort of Vermont is the road test for a northern New England version. As you can see there, it's about advancing local collaborative efforts, building stronger, healthier economies and communities in our rural towns, our regions, our smaller cities. So this was sort of brought together in 2019, and there are 8 projects that are around the state that are under consideration. One in southern Vermont that is a collaboration of some Bennington, BCRC with our colleagues in the Wyndham Regional Commission, the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation, and some other actors of Wyndham County that's focusing sort of as a complement to the Vermont Welcome Wagon project, which is about those new Vermonters who had relocated to this area from elsewhere in the country. Here we're talking about aspiring Americans, people who are not yet citizens, may be interested in moving to the country, interested in moving to small towns with a wonderful quality of life and a functional and participatory state government and local government. So places like where we're fortunate enough to live and call home. The idea of the Working Communities Challenge, which is the New Vermonters Initiative for the Southern Vermont region, is by 2030, rather ambitious one, especially in the context of depopulation that I've been mentioning. It is to bring 1,000 new Americans to Southern Vermont with the belief that by making Vermont and making Southern Vermont more closely resemble the demographics of the current United States and the demographics of the future, we will become a little more vitalized, a little more vitality into our rural areas and our hub towns, and become more aligned with the sorts of lives and lifestyles that other Americans resonate with. So we're hoping that in this combination, this blend of the Vermont Welcome Wagon and with the Working Communities Challenge will present a suite of options or a suite of services to newcomers near and far. And I'm happy to take any questions on any of these 3 issues at this time. And I'll put some of the information for the Welcome Wagon Project, the Communications Union District, and the Working Communities Challenge in the chat momentarily. Thanks.
I have a couple of questions or comments, or one of each or something like that, Jonathan.
Great.
First of all, I noticed that you said that we're serving 12 municipalities with the broadband in the county. And I wondered if that did not include Winhall because it's not part of the BCRC, or if it's because Winhall opted out.
We had some conversation with Winhall, but it was certainly, they were open to join. I believe that was a conversation we were having with some of the border towns to the north as well. And I don't recall whether the Winhall's decisions were about Deerfield Valley, the Southern Vermont CUD, or let's just wait and see. I don't believe that we ended up on their ballot.
Okay. And then secondly, in terms of the census and changing demographics, it'll be interesting to see how COVID may I mean, it's not going to show up in the census probably because the census looks at April 1st, and that sort of predated the exodus from the metropolitan areas in the Northeast to here. But just for example, and I know Winhall's not part of the BCRC, but there are 63 enrollee school kids that have moved to Winhall in the during COVID, and so the town is grappling with how to address that huge influx, relative to the total number of students that Winhall typically sees. So this, brought it up from like 170 to 230 students. And it's going to have huge, property tax implications. But when you consider that influx just in Winhall and the real estate market that is really hopping like it hasn't been for, at least a decade, I wonder if that will affect these trends that the census has been modeling for the Northeast for, a good long time now. And then along with that, I was just sort of cursorily looking at a study that looked at climate migration, climate change related migration, and it actually identified Lamoille County, Vermont, as the least affected county in the country in the United States by climate change. And Bennington County was also very low on the list of being affected, along with a couple of other southern Vermont counties. But and I think that looked at a longer period than just 2030. I think it went to 2070 maybe. Nonetheless, given what's happening right now in terms of fires and hurricanes and COVID, I wonder if we might see a change in the trend, and I wonder if the models might be changing. So there's that. And then lastly, with regard to your last tab, if we as a community in Bennington County and Southern Vermont in general want that kind of program to be successful, we are really going to have to address the issue of race and how unwelcome even people who grew up in our communities here feel right now in Southern Vermont. You've got, the head of the Rutland NAACP who feels that she needs to move because her family has been threatened. You've got kids that grew up in Bennington that came home from college during COVID and have told their families, I am not ever coming back here. If you want to see me at Thanksgiving, you're going to have to come visit me. And you've got just people who do not feel safe here in this environment that we are community members of. And we really are going to, a really important piece of that is going to have to be, how do we make people feel safe and welcome here? And how do we address the racism that is blatant and here, even if it's a minority of people among us, it is here and it is blatant. So that's all. On that note.
Yeah, I wanted to briefly respond. I think those are all points very, very well taken, and absolutely the case. I mean, it's been remarkable to see the notion of, what we might call what climate change will do to settlement patterns. And I think you are very correct that we are thinking about that in terms of what Vermont's particular resilience may be in certain spots of Vermont. I think, it's been interesting to see, obviously Stratton Mountain School, I think, had the largest incoming class that it's ever had. We see, I think, 30 to 40 new families down in the Reedsboro, Twin Valley. I mean, it's noteworthy what the pandemic has done to some of the demographics. And it's occurred to me as well that, boy, it's too bad. I mean, it's not that it's good that this happened, but it is the case that we'll be missing out. The census is going to become, in 2 years, we'll get numbers that we're not really sure about. The hope is that we'll do better than average in terms of retention from some of these families. I can certainly imagine that if someone was entering the last year or two of high school and the thought was, I really don't want them to have that final year remote, then maybe a more temporary move for some of these in-person schools. But it may also be the case that these are families that are here to stay, or families that could be converted. I want to dwell on the final comment that you made, which was, obviously the most poignant one, and one where we are exceedingly aware of that that work has to feel like a capstone and not like just an arbitrary starting spot of an imposition of perspectives or points of view, that if we don't work to earn it, then we'll be encountering we're trying to get a foothold on Teflon, and that will not work. One of the interesting project partners at this point, and this is all, the grants or the project funding applications are due at the end of this month. The announcements of which of the 4 projects of the 8 will receive $300,000 apiece over 3 years is to come sometime in early 2021. And so that's put us in a bit of an interesting position of not wanting to trumpet some initiative that we are not necessarily ready to stand up independently on its own at this point, but wanting to move a little more slowly and cautiously. However, Alex Beck of the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation and I appeared on the News Project with Andrew McKeever a few months ago, just to sort of begin talking about the topic a little bit. And obviously the world has changed since then, and obviously, and not just with respect to the pandemic. The Windham County NAACP chair, having some very important, very strong words for some town officials over by the Connecticut River, and I think that might have been in Putney. There's a lot of inward-looking, a lot of reflection that has to be done. And one of the interesting project partners that we are working with there is called CASP, the Community Asylum Seekers Project, and their specialty has been working with people seeking political asylum. They're based out of Bellows Falls, and it's just a remarkably knowledgeable organization that, in fact, has a new executive director who is a former visiting professor at Bennington College. So there's some interesting mix of academic research, of on-the-ground experience with navigating some bureaucracies and red tape, but there's also a great deal of work to be done in the realm of institutional racism and systemic racism. And I think that was part of what made this project so appealing and compelling to the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston and the assessment team, which included individuals from BCRD, VCF, and some national funders, that this is maybe one of the best chances that we'll have to confront this with the resources to make a lasting commitment to the initiative that is going to be measured just like a census in years and decades.
Jim?
I'm muted. I was going to say, I appreciate your comments, Janet and Jonathan, and looking at my Zoom screen, and I'm saying maybe a year or two from now, there'll be a little bit more diversity on my screen. So we definitely have some progress to be made. So getting on to it, 7 o'clock, so I do want to wrap up, unless anybody has any final thoughts, comments. I do want to note that, especially in the context of this demographic changes and potential in migration, we want to make sure that we accommodate that land use shifts as efficiently as possible. And so one of the things we're going to be doing is, as Kat mentioned earlier, looking at zoning for neighborhoods and mixed use development. So we're going to highlight a project that the state's worked on with some of the regional planning commissions on that at our November meeting, probably also held by Zoom. And we'll also have, I think, particularly importantly, some information on innovative small-scale wastewater solutions for villages, something that really has been holding back development in a lot of our rural communities. So I think it's going to be really interesting. So look for information on that. I think a lot of folks in our communities, especially some of our town officials, could really benefit from that information. So unless anybody has any closing thoughts, Janet, I'll turn it back to you to adjourn the meeting.
Can I entertain a motion to?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Who was that? Dixie?
Yep.
Thank you, Dixie. And a second?
I'll second.
Second it.
Nancy beat you to it, Cinda.
Okay, that's fine.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No nays.
Thank you.
Good night,
Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.
Thank you for attending.
Thanks.